Excellent. Welcome back. Just to let you know, the breakout session going on right now, you've got Brian talking about vaping. But for the main stage now, we are very pleased to introduce Dave Rubin to be interviewing Ayaan Hirsi Ali, two of my favorite thinkers and always fun to listen to. I'm not going to take up too much of your time because we want to hear as much of this as possible. You would already know Dave Rubin, of course. He's become quite famous on the interwebs. And it's been, from a libertarian perspective, fascinating to watch him evolve over the last, 3 or 4 years to become one of us. So with that, welcome, Dave. Please take it away.
Thanks. It's good to be with you guys. I am one of you, for better or worse. We'll find out. Yes, I actually am one of you guys. And by one of you guys, I would say a liberty-minded person. You know, I like to describe myself as a classical liberal, which I'm sure everyone watching this stream has a good sense of what that is. You know, I always talk about there's sort of two main things that you need to believe in to be a classical liberal, which, by the way, I think most people in free Western societies are. You have to believe in individual rights, of course, meaning that every member of a free society, as long as you're there legally, then you should have the same laws as anyone else, live under the same laws as anyone else, regardless of skin color, sexuality, gender, or any other immutable characteristic, or even national origin or anything else. We should all be treated equally under the law. And then I believe in basically the light touch of government, sort of laissez-faire economics, that, you know, we want markets and competition to rule the day as much as possible, and a light touch of government to do some of the things that kind of keep the wheels on the train here, so to speak. That really is the summation of what I believe in, the ideas that I've tried to bring forward on YouTube. And you know, apparently they were needed here in America, because as you guys know, whether you're in America right now, or you're watching in Australia, or wherever you're watching all over the world, you know, we're living in this really bizarre time that everyone's having trouble defining. There seems to be this giant collectivist wave taking over everything, and you know, the ideas of collectivism, that we should somehow be whittled down to just the way we look, or just what our sexuality or gender is. These are the time-tested, awful ideas that have killed people. You know, that we should judge people based on the color of their skin, judge people based on their religion, or these other things, and yet somehow they seem to be the trendy ideas of the day. And you know, just briefly before I get to Ayaan, you know, one of the things that happened to me, I was a lefty. I bought into all of those ideas. I was a progressive. I was a Bernie supporter, believe it or not. You can find videos of me. I'm not proud, but they exist. You know, of me supporting Bernie Sanders, believe it or not. I watch them and I wonder who snatched my body. But you know, the thing is that these ideas, these collectivist ideas, these big government ideas, the idea that the system can somehow make everything right, that the government can lead you to utopia, are the most dangerous ideas that there are. And I think most of the people watching this, and really I think the purpose of the Friedman conference and why I wanted to do it, is that most of us realize that the best way to have human flourishing is always to limit the power that's above us. And by limiting that power and keeping that power at bay, you enable people to live the way they want to live. And by the way, that's a little bit messy, right? Your neighbor may want to live in a way that you're not thrilled with, and you may believe something different than your cousin and your brother and everything else. I mean, we see this with everyone fighting on Facebook all day, but that actually is the beauty of freedom. And when people come in with these sort of big government answers to say, oh, no, if we only had all of these laws and all of these perfect systems so that you would live properly, I think what happens to young people is they suddenly go, oh, that sounds right. And that's why these ideas proliferate the way they do. And unfortunately, what we're seeing right now is the fruits of that, where we have an entire young generation right now that somehow seems to think that socialism or communism or Marxism, that these are cool ideas. But the reason that I'm enthused about the world, truly, despite all of the craziness right now between corona lockdowns and protests and everything else, is that the silver lining that I see is that I get email every day, and my Twitter is blown up every day, and all the other ways people can reach me, from people who are finally waking up and they're going, this is not right. You know, I thought it was all right. I thought the government was just supposed to do everything. I thought that the left had all the answers. They were the good guys. And, you know, all you conservatives and right-leaning people and libertarians, I thought you were all bigots and racists and homophobes. And, you know, this is what the kids call the red pill. Once you sort of wake up and see the world as it is, not as you want it to be, well, then you have an incredible opportunity to build bridges and I think change the world in immeasurable ways. And I think that is probably the perfect way to segue to our guest here, because Ayaan Hirsi Ali is really the embodiment of what fighting for what you believe in is all about. She has an incredible story. Ayaan, I could give your whole bio, but I've interviewed you so many times, and I think most people know your bio, and you're probably tired of talking about your bio, but you're a human rights activist, originally from Somalia. You've lived an extraordinary life of being on the front lines of what it means to fight for freedom. And you've had friends killed. Theo Van Gogh, who was killed, and the jihadists posted a note on his body that they were coming for you next. You've made it to America, where now you fight relentlessly for freedom and all of those things. I don't want to make you blush here, but you are the reason, I think, that you're not the reason. You are the example that so many people need these days of why you should fight for what you believe in. So that's where we should start here. What is it that has got you here, that gave you the juice to still fight for what you believe in, when we live in a time where so many people are afraid to say what they think?
Well, David, thank you so very, very much for this introduction. I'm just thrilled to be with you. Friedman Conference, let me just start with that. And then, I don't know if, let's do some sound check. Can you all hear me?
We can all hear you. At least I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. In your introduction, you mentioned a difference between the world as it is versus the world as it should be. And I'm a classical liberal, and I'm proud of the fact that as a classical liberal, you start with working with the world as it is. And then you talk about the world as it should be. And I was born and raised in an environment where the world around me was, you had no choice but to accept it as it was. I was born in Somalia. I grew up in places like Saudi Arabia and Ethiopia and Kenya. We had man-made epidemics. We had diseases, viruses. You know, I was growing up, there was malaria, smallpox, chickenpox, measles, hepatitis, had a bunch of those. I grew up in an environment where we're totally, utterly comfortable with talking about death, because children died, parents died, young people died, old people died, and that was the world as it is. And trying to conform it, trying to make the world bend to you. And that's something that in my context, it came with the white man. And the white man came with books, and through stories. Oh, they used to colonize us, and they told us to do this, and they told us to do that. And so I have this background where when I look at what we're going through today,
Mm-hmm.
I say, wait, don't throw the baby with the bathwater. You want to talk about racism? Fine. Remember, once upon a time in Africa, we talked about decolonization. We threw out the white man, but then we got our own local oppressions. Hey, the white guy comes in maybe the shape of Bill Gates. Let's get a vaccine to get rid of polio. Let's talk about malaria. Instead of talking about race, instead of talking about what divides us, why don't we talk about our common humanity? and what we have achieved as common human beings. But to say that is not to negate that there is a racial problem, or that there is, homosexuals have been excluded and exploited, that women have been excluded and exploited. And this goes on to this day. Let's talk about all of those issues. But one framework that I live in, David, I know you are with me in the United States, and I know that our audience today, they're in Australia and other places, but I do absolutely love the American Constitution because it gives people like you and me, it gives us the framework and the moral, what is the word? It gives us the moral language to say, if the Constitution declares that we are free and we're born equal, well, what about these inequalities? And it does make me very, very angry when people say the American system is one of systemic racism. Let's get rid of it. Let's dismantle it. And so here we are today. People like me, I want to point out people like Ilhan Omar, we fled our own man-made, homemade anarchies and oppressions and disruptions. We flee, we come to a place like America, and we want to turn this into Mogadishu.
Do you think that it is almost a disease of the West that we could live in such extraordinary freedom, extraordinary affluence, all of the wonderful things that capitalism, that freedom have provided? And this is not just from an American perspective. We absolutely can talk about this from an Australian perspective, UK, et cetera, that the West has become so successful in a certain way and freed so many people that in a certain sense is our weakness right now. And that is what the Ilhan Omars, the Marxists, the communists, the collectivists, that's what they're using against us, that we don't have major problems to solve, say systemic racism, which doesn't really exist, meaning it's built into the American system. It's not. So they try to find it everywhere to use against us.
So I think racism exists.
Well, racism, of course, there are always going to be racists. We know this.
We have racists in the United States. We have sexists. We have people who exclude other human beings, grounds of race, gender, class, you name it. It's part of the human fabric. What bothers me is to say that our system, the foundational principles and institutions and culture of America is irredeemable. It is so racist, it's so bad that we have to completely throw it out, defund the police, throw out the rule of law. It's that dramatic, revolutionary mood. I think that's absolutely wrong. And what you and I are talking about, I think, to our audience tonight, and hopefully, I hope we stand up to these people, is to say, wait a second, we do want to address the problems we have. And if you think that this problem should be, let's take race relations, that should be a priority, let's go for it. Let's address that. But we're going to do it within the system. We're not going to dismantle the system. Now, what is wrong with our elite, our politicians on the Republican side, on the Democratic, the conservatives, the liberals, everywhere, what is wrong with our elites is instead of standing up to these people and saying, yes, let's address our problems on the one hand, but we are going to do it through our system and our institution, they're saying, fine, we're going to take the knee. We're going to do these, bizarre things like is symbols, Black Lives Matter is now going to speak for all of us. You can't say anything to an organization like Black Lives Matter. And we find ourselves, and this is not just the United States of America. I've seen it in the UK. I've seen it in other European countries. You take an issue, it's a serious issue. take climate change or transgender or women's rights. So, and you see people form a cult around it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they present you with a perspective. And if you don't take that perspective, you're blaspheming.
Can you talk a little bit of
Yeah.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the cult of fear that they use once that cult, as you described it, once that has formed, the cult of fear, because you come from a way of life that was very based around fear. You could not speak up and say what you want. You couldn't marry who you wanted to marry, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that if even for our Australian audience right now, there are a lot of good people who are just average people who maybe aren't even particularly political, but have very middle of the road beliefs. And they're afraid to post what they want on Facebook or on Twitter or anywhere else because the mob is going to come for them. Can you talk about just how the fear factor in many ways is actually the fuel that they're using against us?
Precisely. And I'm so glad you bring this up, because I want to say to you, I was raised in a society that was grounded in fear. And then I fled and I came to the Netherlands, a society that's grounded in freedom and maybe pseudo fear, because I mean, it's a very conformist nation. Then I came to America, and America was this, oh my God, you know, it's all about freedom. And I've been to Australia many times, and Australians are, in fact, in some ways, even though it's a smaller society, it's a society that's much more about seeking freedom than submitting to fear. And so you have this fear versus freedom. And when it comes to discussing issues that are really important and affect everyone, what you're seeking is to be in an environment where you can get all perspectives. You can get all good faith people to come in and talk about the issues of our day: climate, gender, immigration, you know, our world as it is, and what could we do to move things on and make things better. Now, when I was raised in Somalia, Saudi Arabia, as a Muslim child, one thing I understood was fear. You are not going to do anything if you understand the consequences, and the consequences would be that you would be punished. You'd be punished so bad, you could be killed. And so people just shut up and put up. And so coming into the free society, it was such a breath of fresh air. For me, it was to say, oh, we don't do that. You know, you're an individual. If you think you have something to say it, write it, express it, put it in a movie. We appreciate it. We love it. You know, and having been here for about 24, 25 years, I'm thinking, with these woke people, with what we are seeing today, people are being shut up. We're developing a society of fear. Not fear the way I see the fear that I knew. It was, we'll cut off your head. But here's, we'll take your job away. We'll mount a campaign of ostracism. You'll never be invited anywhere again. You're a racist. You're transphobic. You're a climate denier. You're xenophobic. And so people just tend to shut up.
Are you shocked the way this thing has just exploded over the last, it really seemed, well, really in an American perspective, although I guess worldwide as well, the George Floyd incident, the murder, basically that exploded this thing. But now it seems to be completely running out of control in a million other ways. So like, you know, the monuments being torn down everywhere and schools changing their names and watching. It seems to me that we are watching and in the process of watching every single one of our liberal institutions crumble. And you started this by saying that you also identify as a classical liberal. Do you think that there's a weakness actually in liberalism that the lefties, the Marxists, the Black Lives Matter movement, do you think that they saw a weakness and that is how they got into the system?
I think the weakness of classical liberals is to stay silent. The great classical liberals in their day, when they were faced with the forces of censorship and illiberalism, they were not silent. They thought, they spoke, they actually went to great lengths, put their lives on the line and their livelihoods on the line, to advocate for freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of conscience. And with my fellow classical liberals of today, with a few exceptions, JK, you, Sam Harris, I mean, our dear old friend who passed away, I just wonder what Christopher Hitchens would say today.
I know.
With a few of those exceptions, I have not exhausted the list, but with a few of those exceptions, I think what we are seeing is people are just sitting at home and they're being silent, and they're hoping that this thing is going to go away, and it's not. It will not. Appeasement is a terrible, terrible thing for liberty. You appease, they take more. You say, you can have this statue, but then they come for the next one. You say, you can have this book, but then they come for the next one. You sacrifice this individual, but then they come for the next one. You give them this institution, but they come for, they want total. That's why they're called totalitarians.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is good people saying nothing and staying by and being silent. That's what's bringing our societies and our civilization down. It is not the fringe extremists. I still think of them as a minority. It's not them. It's us being silent.
Do you fear that the more that we're all silent, that ultimately what that will lead to is a backlash that will actually be racist? Where, you know, I would say from where we are in America that you're right. Of course, there are racists, there are extremists. I personally don't believe they're in positions of power right now. But basically, this movement that's causing us all to look at everything through race constantly and through a collectivist lens constantly, that eventually and tear down our history and everything else, that it will actually lead to a growth of what I think would be considered a sort of xenophobic and more authoritarian right as a backlash to it. And that's sort of why you need the good people to stand up now.
It's one reason why you want good people to stand up, but it's a better reason. It's a good reason. It's a good reason. So, you know, there's going to be a backlash, and some people in the center might think, well, I might as well be, if they keep calling me a racist, why not just be a racist then? And maybe that's even their goal. Because then that gives them the empirical evidence to say, you see, all along, I've been telling you they were racist. So I don't encourage that. I don't want people to react to this and say, if I'm going to be accused of being a racist, then I might as well. I think that would be the wrong way to go. What I would like us to do is to actually go and revisit our values of common humanity. These three, you know, for me, when you talk about freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of conscience, people actually died for that stuff. People died and spent their entire livelihoods establishing these institutions. We've inherited them. And we are now seeing people come in, the collectivists, the anti-liberals, the Marxists, come in and take over these institutions, and we're letting it happen. Do you want to send your kids to a school where they get indoctrinated with this stuff?
No, and most people don't. And I think that also is in many ways the secondary reason why we're going to watch our institutions crumble. They're going to crumble because of these bad ideas. But then all the good people, you know, the quote unquote good people, are going to basically self-select out, and they just won't want to be sending their kids to these institutions anyway. You sort of hit on this a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about the Islamist connection to these movements? because obviously you grew up in that, and you know how they use these movements to sort of coalesce their power.
Well, the Islamists is one organization that I think you and I have talked a lot about, the Muslim Brotherhood, for instance. It's an institution that is Islamist, that likes to work through existing political and cultural institutions, the institutions of education, the institutions of entertainment, institutions of politics, the institutions of media, and the elite corporations, etc. So what they do, you know, you look at ISIS and you think, oh, they want to blow things up, or Al-Qaeda. So, you know, you think, my God, law enforcement should go after them. The military should go after them. They're so incredibly explicit in what they want. Destroy the system. Bring down airplanes, bring down airports, etc. The Muslim Brotherhood is different. They're very subtle. They're very gradualist. And so when they look at us tearing each other apart, conservatives versus liberals, Republicans versus Democrats, they wade in and they see what it is that is making. So if you're white and you're made to be uncomfortable about your whiteness, white fragility, white privilege, all this nonsense these people are coming up with, that's what they're going to hook on, right? That's how they're going to get to you. And you have the introduction of this word, Islamophobia. And you've been convinced that you're a racist, that you're xenophobic, that you're suffering from all sorts of biases that you're not even conscious of. Why not throw in Islamophobia in there? And if you do that, in institution after institution, they take advantage of that. And it's not just the Islamists. We have adversaries in China, we have adversaries in Russia. Then it becomes very easy for our civilization and the institutions of our civilization to be compromised, not on a military level, not on a political level, but on a cultural level, because of what we are told about ourselves and the way we are divided. You and I have a different skin color, and I am told, hey, you're black, they're exploiting you. And I'm made to internalize that. You are told you are white, and you are this racist, and you've no idea you are, but you are. And somehow we find our society divided along these lines and along these categories of people. And most of us think, when did this even happen?
Yeah, I think that's what almost everyone, every decent person right now, I think that's what they're thinking. You know, it's one thing for us, you know, we're sort of political beasts, and we track this stuff and we live this stuff. But I think the average person is walking. How did this happen? When did this happen? They feel like they just woke up in a completely different world.
And we have to push back. And I really, really want to appeal to your audience, the classical liberals, the rational people, the common man and woman, to stand up and say, I'm not a racist, and I'm not exploited. I'm free. I live in a free society. And if we have problems, please, let's pinpoint them, get together, resolve them, and try to resolve them. You know, that whole community spirit, let's get back to that. That's what made America great and exceptional.
Do you think that those of us who are liberty-minded, whether you're a libertarian or a classical liberal or a constitutional conservative, just people that don't want to use the levers of government to accomplish everything, do you think that we're always intrinsically at a disadvantage because the other side, because politics is a game of power, they're always looking for power to use, and that's what the whole game is. The whole system is designed for people to take power. When you're the guy or the girl saying, oh no, I'm not here to control your life, I'm not here to tax you to the nth degree, I'm not here to tell you how to live or do this or do that, you actually, in many ways, you sort of self-select out of the game. So good people who are liberty-minded, they don't even want to become politicians, they don't want to become politically active because their salvation is not found in the system. Where if you believe that the system is everything, you're going to devote a lot to it in a very religious manner, which is really what we're seeing right now. Does that always put all of us and everyone watching this at a certain disadvantage?
It does. I think it does because classical liberals, and I'm talking about contemporary classical liberals, we've adopted a live and let live disposition to the world. And I think, and now we're paying for it. We are, I've, I can complain about there's, so I'm talking to the Australian community right now, but I look at people like Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders, what's this woman?
Rashida
Tlaib, and then Senator Warren. You look at them and you think, about 5-10 years ago, I was exhausted by politics. I had come to a place where I thought, I just want to read books. I just want to be with my family and my friends. I want to live a life of freedom. I don't want to be involved in politics and its ugliness. And I think a lot of us think that way. I just want to run my business. I just want to look after my children. I just want to do what is right. I want to look after my community. I don't want to associate with these other people. And then before we know it, we find ourselves living in counties and states and nation states where they're running our lives. Mm-hmm. Because we let it go. And so I'm ashamed to say, perhaps we must start running for office and need to get involved in how our countries and our societies are run.
Yeah, well, we better. We have no choice, right?
We have no choice. I mean, you need to get involved in what your kids are being taught at school. What books are they reading? Who's teaching them? Who's involved in teacher training college programs? What is going on? We don't do that because we live in a republic. We live in a democracy. We have the freedom to think. I even took up gardening, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, me too. In the middle of Corona, I've got a nice garden outside now.
Right, and now I think we're being torn out of that, and we're being told, no, you can't. You can't give yourself that break, because if you do that, you're giving the levers of power to the wrong people. And unfortunately, we all need to wake up. We all need to get involved. I hate to talk like them. I sound like them right now.
They've pushed you to the point of sounding like them. But that is the bizarre situation. I know your whole worldview is not wrapped up in politics. You have a much wider philosophical worldview. And yet the problems that we have right now are these deep political problems that are taking a bunch of people who don't care about politics and going, you better get involved now because it's coming for you. You may not be interested in it, but it is interested in you.
It's interested in you. Go to the website of Black Lives Matter and see what it is that they're advocating. And you'll be stunned to find out that it has nothing to do with Black lives.
No, they actually talk about destroying the nuclear family.
Destroying the nuclear family, destroying our economic system, destroying our political system, destroying it. It has nothing. You'll be stunned. It has nothing to do with the police or Black lives, or that was the hook for them, but they're into something else. You read someone like the guy I sent you, Schellenberger, and
Mike Schellenberger, yeah.
Michael Schellenberger. He was there for what did he say? 2-3 decades. Environmentalist, climate. He wants to tell us now what he has found, and he's being shut down from everywhere. Everybody needs to wake up to this sort of thing. You need to be able to come back into the arena and say, if we really do want to maintain free societies, then free people have to be involved in it. And one thing I want to leave you all with is, please be involved in how your children are being educated or rather indoctrinated.
You
Because
have to be.
remember, as human beings, what we have, it's nothing. It's our children.
Yeah. You know, I could ask you questions all day long, but I feel like we should get to some of the audience questions here, because we've done this before, and I want to be fair to the people who are joining us here for the Friedman conference. This is interesting. Ayaan, given your background in the Netherlands, what do you think of the chance that an exit with the Dutch leaving the EU is possible? I haven't even heard that being discussed. Is that something being discussed, or is that just a wishful thinking by our Dutch viewer?
Look, I don't know about an exit, but I followed absolutely everything I could find about Brexit. And the arguments that the Brexiteers were making were not, they didn't want hostile to the idea of an ever closer union. It was about, we all have come to, it took people in Europe a long time to come to the conclusion, we govern ourselves, the people govern. And so if you keep saying things are going to Brussels, you can't make your own decisions about what happens in your own backyard, what happens to your fishing waters, what happens to your immigration situation, what happens to your legal system, people do get dissatisfied. So I'm not surprised that people are talking about an exit or Brexit or Polexit or whatever. But it's sad, because you would say, I wish, let me tell you, any European member of the EU, I wish that this organization had developed in the way that the United States had developed, where you would give all the different states, nation states, complete decentralized decision-making powers, and make these institutions be a part of them. Are they having that conversation? It doesn't surprise me in the least.
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me either. You hit on this a little bit, but maybe we should go a little further, because I think this is the issue of the day. It says, Andrew Breitbart used to say that politics is downstream of culture. Is identity politics a political problem or a cultural problem first and foremost? You talked a little bit about the cultural aspect and how they're using our own culture against us. For people, though, that are more of the policy people that like to talk about policy, are they missing what the real issue is, and that it really is just a cultural issue, meaning the books we read and the TV shows we watch and the movies we consume and the stuff we're watching on Netflix and everything else?
As a classical liberal, I belong to the group who says politics is a product of culture. Politics is a product of culture because it's what we teach our children. It's our information sources. It's our entertainment sources. If collectively we come to conclusion on culture, then that translates into politics. And that's exactly what we were talking about earlier on. If you have a culture of fear, that will translate into politics of fear. And right now we have a culture of fear. People in our education system, teachers, professors, mentors, they're terrified of saying what they want to say, teach what they think they might want to teach, publish publishing houses, they're terrified. And then you have Hollywood. That all translates into politics. And so that gives you the answer. That's what makes a nation like a superpower, the United States of America. That's what makes it vulnerable. That's our Achilles heel. I know we have the greatest military in the world, and we can destroy any other nation, organization, you name it. But it's our culture. That's how you come. You come into these institutions and you start to warp and twist the way people think and the way people express themselves. I tell you, you're a racist. And get young, impressionable minds to be manipulated, and we manipulate. And that's how, this is what makes us vulnerable. This is what we need to wake up to.
Yeah. Do you think that that's oddly Trump's greatest skill, is that he understood somehow that this was a cultural thing and not a political thing? So he came in reality TV star, you know, bigger than life personality, whatever you want to say about him, positively or negatively, the hair and he's orange and the whole thing. But he understood that the culture part was what he was going to fight, which then you can do, excuse me, then you can do some of the political things you want to do. What I was always saying during the election was, you know, people wanted a panther in a china shop. They wanted some things to be broken, but then for the panther to just walk out and close the door. But there's no metaphor, panther in a china shop. You get a bull in a china shop. Do you think he just gets the culture thing for some reason in a way that maybe Republicans haven't or conservatives haven't before?
I don't know. You know, I always like to refer to Michael Moore, 2016, when he said, wow, if this happens, it's going to be this big middle finger. And I think that's a big middle finger right there.
We got the middle finger. We got the middle finger.
But it's not, I also think it's how we react to it. Because if we react to it, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, if we react to it, oh yeah, okay, this is like a one-off thing, it's just going to pass. You know, in 2020, we'll go back to normal. If that's the reaction, then I think we haven't understood what the problem is. Then we're not plumbing into what's going on in the country, in Western civilization, our response to the idea of globalization versus the nation state. You know, we're not talking about all of these. We're going to have. I think the crisis will carry on, but I hope that we will. I hope that I talk to enough people, David, who say to me, we're talking. It's not about Trump. It's about our nation. It's about our civilization. It's about our humanity.
Yeah, I mean, for all of us, it's like whether you grew up in Somalia or you grew up in Australia or you grew up in China or you grew up in Canada, almost in every situation, all of us come from ancestors who had it so much worse than us. And that we sit here and think that we have it the worst, or we're the ones that have to burn down the system, is just such a scary and dangerous thing.
And the loudest... okay, go on.
So this is interesting because we haven't quite touched on this yet. As opposed to defund the police, is there anything that you would do that would reform the system of policing if you believe the system needs reforming?
Well, in the US, we have 900,000 police force. That's how strong it is. That's huge. And then we also have a system where every state has got its own rules. Of course, I would say, first of all, let me say, I have a great deal of respect for the police. I've been protected by the police. I don't know if your audience knows this or not, but I've been threatened for a long time, at least since 2000, and I even forget, it's that long ago.
Yeah.
For a long time, I've been protected by people in uniform. And so I have huge respect for them. And I know that they're ethical. I know that they're doing absolutely the best. There are a few bad apples. There are rules of what to do when misconduct happens. Could we improve on that? Yes, absolutely. The unions, I've been listening to a lot of people talk to me about police unions. Hey, if I'm the mother of a policeman or the wife of a policeman, I would want a union or some organization, some institution to protect them. Let's be honest about that. How else are you going to find men and women to serve this way if they're going to be marched to hell if they make a mistake, or in fact, if they're accused of something they didn't do right? So let's get all of that out there. And then along comes, we live in societies where police are now being called to address issues that they should not be addressing. Mental health, for instance. The homeless people, you know where you live, and where I live.
Yeah.
So I kind of think we've overburdened the police. When I lived in Holland and I talked about women's issues, domestic violence, my best friends were the police, but they were always helpless. They would throw their hands up in the air and say, well, I've been called to this household. This woman has been battered, but I can't do anything because the law doesn't let me do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So things are more complex than you think. And I think demonizing the police, let alone defunding them, is a path to hell. It's a path to dismantling the rule of law, and I'm against it. And 72% of Black people who were polled, it was a Monmouth poll in the Pennsylvania area, they're against it. People who depend on the police, they don't want the police to be defunded. The police on their side. Yeah, one or two people there.
Well, in every city right now, every city across the United States.
It should not have happened.
Yeah, and we're seeing that, by the way. Every city across the United States that's defunding the police or cutting police officers. Well, first off, they're getting tons of suddenly retiring police.
Oh,
I don't know. Yeah, just this week, New York had to put a cap on the amount of retiring police officers because they're just putting their hands up and saying, we just can't be part of this anymore. And New York City had more shootings last week than I think in 2 decades or something. We've only got about 3 minutes left.
Shootings, most of them are Black people.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we've got about 3 minutes left. You know what? I'm only going to do one more because I think this is the right question to end on here. Some people see racism and sexism everywhere in Western democracies when there's no personal cost to the person pointing the finger. But the same people are quiet when it comes to these issues in Islamic societies. And then here's really the question that I think sums up everything. How important is it to be brave like you have been? And what can we do to be more brave?
I don't know if I'm being brave. I think I'm just stating the obvious. I've lived in all of these different countries. I know what it is not to have the freedoms that I enjoy here. To be quite honest with you, I also, and I don't want to be racist here, but I've also seen a bunch of white middle-class kids who are brats, who are looking for something to do and be excited about, and I don't think we should indulge them. I don't think this is a black and white issue. You want to ask, do we want a lot of Black people to be lifted up to and into the middle classes and beyond? Yes, let's talk about that. Charter schools, education, employment, let's get rid of discrimination. Let's have these serious discussions. But these people who want to throw statues down, I mean, I look at them and I think, idiots. I just want to spank them. I'm sorry, David. A lot of them are just white, middle-class kids who have either been terrified into saying these things, taking these positions, or who believe in this romantic notion that if you bring everything down, you destroy our institutions, you're going to go into some kind of socialist utopia. It's both wrong.
Ayaan, I know we could do this all day long, and there's a long live stream. We're going to have to cut it there. You know, every time I talk to you, I feel a sort of sigh of relief at the end that there's some goodness on the horizon. But on this particular conversation, just in the last few minutes, the way the sun is setting behind you, you're actually glowing right now. So there's some sort of metaphor here, but it's always a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And thanks to everybody at the Friedman Conference for allowing us to do this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dave Rubin and Ayan Hirsi Ali. That was absolutely a fascinating discussion to witness and such an honor for us to have this as part of Friedman 2020. Dave, I run Generation Liberty, the biggest Australian youth liberty program, and when I talk to young people on campus, your name comes up so often when I ask them, how did you get interested in liberty? How did you come to this place? So I want to thank you on behalf of the Australian Youth Liberty Movement. And also, Ayan Hirsi Ali, you are such an inspiration and a modern day heroine, I would say. You know, as a woman myself, from a difficult background, you always get told you can't think that, you can't say that in our society today. And I meet a lot of young people who've had that feeling too. But I think you're a real role model of strength and a real inspiration to young people everywhere. So I'd really like to thank you for that.
And just before we talk about Dave's book, I want to second that and say the theme really, as we saw it coming into this session, was actually courage, because both of you with completely different journeys, coming from completely different places, and this isn't about comparing the two, but each of you have had to show courage. I would argue in both cases greater than the average person. The courage to actually admit that your ideas were wrong, the courage to actually take flight and completely change your life in pursuit of a better life. And it's wonderful that you've both come to this place where you are now, where we can have you, and just thank you so much for giving us your time. Yeah, and we actually have a copy of Dave Rubin's new book, which is absolutely an amazing read. So Dave, could you just tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, well, first off, most importantly, that lady right over there, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, is quoted extensively in the book, so you know it's good, putting aside anything that I talk about in there. And I just want to say that it's a pleasure to be with you guys. And as you know, I got to spend a few weeks in Australia when I was on tour with Jordan Peterson, and to meet the amount of people that I met in all the different cities in Australia who are true liberty lovers and freedom lovers. And out of all the countries that we went to, Ayaan sort of hit on this earlier, but out of all the countries, there was a sense in Australia of a real streak of freedom and individualism and political incorrectness and fun and zest for life that I absolutely just loved. Very quickly on the book, I mean, everything that we just talked about is exactly why I wrote Don't Burn this book. The classical liberal ideas that Ayaan just talked about, of limited government, of individual rights, of free thought, of free expression, these are the things that are actually on trial in the West right now. Yet these are also the things that built the West into being the great free places that we all love to live. You know, for whatever struggles there are in Australia right now, for whatever struggles there are in the United States right now, most of us don't want to leave. You know, very few people leave. Sometimes someone may leave Australia to go to the US to work in tech, or we might go to Australia to do something else. But very rarely do we leave Western nations to go to Eastern nations. There's a reason for that. And, you know, to watch, riots and protesting is fine. Of course, protesting is always fine as long as it's within the legal limits and you're not harming people or property, although suddenly they're telling us that we're allowed to harm property. I could have titled the book, Don't Burn the Store That This Book Is In, because we seem to be burning stores now. Yeah. And, you know, we've even seen articles recently in NPR and pretty influential magazines talking about decolonizing our bookshelf, which in essence is a modern day book burning. So really the purpose of the book is not to convince you that I'm right about every political position. I lay out everything that I believe on taxation, on foreign policy, on abortion, on everything that there is. But the thesis of the book is not to say, oh, you better agree with me on these things. The thesis of the book is I want you to think about these things seriously. And if you come to a different conclusion than I do on taxation, on abortion, whatever it might be, that's fine. If you got there honestly, and then the beauty in a free society is that we can talk about it without trying to kill each other. And I think, unfortunately, that seems to be the very precept that is up for debate right now.
Well, I have to compliment you on the name of the book. I've never felt the urge to burn a book before, but something about this book and this title just makes me want to give it a go. You know, maybe that's the rebellious streak in me. I don't know.
The contrarian libertarian.
Yeah, never tell a libertarian what not to do. Right? You know?
Well, they say more American flags get sold in the Middle East for the purpose of being burned than actually get sold in America. So you might sell a lot of copies of your book that way. But Dave Rubin, Ayan Hirsi Ali, thank you both so much. It's been such a pleasure, and what an amazing way to start this conference with you guys taking the second session for us. And we've got another 22 hours of liberty coming your way. But Dave and Ayan, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys. I hope you have plenty of coffee.